right, good evening, listeners. Welcome to Motley Crude, episode 18. I'm Kevin, and this evening with me, I've got Ryan. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. And we've also got, in replacement of Andrew, who's out sick with some Nurgle's plague, we've got Danny with us. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Another good night.
You're basically progressing from recurring guest to part-time show member at this point, I think.
Yeah, it's been fun though. I enjoy coming on here.
Yeah, we like having you on, and you're super flexible, which we definitely appreciate because these things tend to happen last minute. So it's been great. Okay, so this evening, guys, we're going to be talking about missions in general. We're going to be talking about the new narrative missions that GW published on, I think, on the 25th of February, and we're going to be talking about mission design more broadly for the old world. However, before we get to that point, let's talk about what's new in everybody's hobby. So let's start with you tonight, Ryan.
God, when was our last episode?
I've played it was almost 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I've played a few games since then. I bought a box of Grail Knights.
Nice.
I haven't built them. I think tomorrow I'm taking the plunge on whatchamacallit, on my Nuln army that I will finally actually build.
Nice.
And yeah, that just some games, some fine-tuning questions about various events coming up. I'll talk about it later, but I'm now also TOing an event that I have to do stuff for. So that's that.
Awesome. Like you've played a few games of Nuln already, like on
Warhol, yeah.
Yeah. How do you like the Army of Infamy?
I have a lot of fun with it. It's like obviously like it still struggles into some weird things.
Yeah.
But like it was nice to just go with like here's a theme, work down from there, and I'm enjoying it.
Sure. I think you're definitely our only local player that will play Nuln, so I'm eager to see how that'll pan out.
And it won't include 8 Outriders. So
nice. You're not even going Outrider spam. Okay.
Yeah, so I keep debating between 1 unit of Outriders or just 2 units of
Road
the Road Wardens.
I keep wanting to call them Road Warriors, like Mad Max style.
I mean they are.
Yeah, basically, yes. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, good. And let's go next with let's do Danny. What's new in your hobby, man?
For me, I've just been kind of took a deep dive into High Elves since the Arcane Journal came out.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten like 4 or 5 games in so far, a couple in person and a couple on Warhol.
Nice.
Also just trying to get stuff built. I just finished building the last of 20 Sisters last night, and then primed them today because the weather was so nice for it. It was like 15 degrees, so perfect priming weather. But just really trying to get out from playing demons for so long to something that's, a little bit more reliable.
Yeah.
And
a little bit more competitive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I played into both you guys in the last week, so trying out the lists, trying different versions.
And you pivoted away from the Garrison into the Warhost of Christ, right?
Yeah, like I probably still I still have 30 Sea Guard and the Merworms, and I got Ashaya Vest. I'll probably still build that list, and it'll be more for just not want to think about anything, just kind of stand there, kind of more defensive build, I think.
Yeah.
But still have fun. But I know if I'm going to a tournament, I pretty much have to bring either a grand army or Tracian.
List. For sure. Ryan, have you seen his dragon counts as that Danny's building?
I have not seen that yet. No.
Oh yeah. So I took the in Cities of Sigmar, they have a character that's on a Manticore.
Yes.
And I pretty much chopped the top half off, and then I've took a White Lion's body, like pretty much the champion from the plastic kit, and use that as like the rider.
That's
and
cool.
Sawing off as much of the Sigmar things. There's a lot of like twin-tailed stuff all over it, so I've been cutting those tails off, I guess, and then slapping on some lion logos for the for white
Yeah,
lions.
that was like when I made a Grail relic out of the Sigmar Pope.
Exactly.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So he's got lion themed dude riding massive flying lion. So it's
Yes.
perfect.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. How so speaking a little bit more about like your games, just because I find the Army of Infamy so interesting, like two questions. How have the woodsmen been doing? And then have you found that the big patch of difficult terrain is actually impactful in your games?
For the woodsmen, I'd say they're a lot of fun. Like, feel like not having any AP is like the biggest downside, and because of that, I've been like, oh, maybe I should take out my usual wizard and then slap in a
Elementalism.
just for
Yeah.
Plague of Rust.
Yeah.
But then because of that build, I feel like I'd have to go with a lower familiar just to guarantee that spell, and
Yeah.
yeah. But it is a fun way to make them more effective, but they are still really potent.
Yeah. And then the difficult terrain.
Difficult terrain is just generally a nice thing. It kind of, since my army is pretty skirmish, just kind of moving around. If anyone's trying to come in, I can sit on the other side of it or inside of it. So if they do charge me, they're going to be more likely not to make the charge, where I can countercharge with the woodsmen themselves to get that, I guess, strength or initiative 5, strength 6 attacks, which ends up working out pretty well.
Yeah, I think like so we spoiler alert, I'll talk about it in about 3 minutes, but we had Danny and I played a game over the last week, and he was using the Creation Warhost, and I kind of had the two sort of similar conclusions to what you just kind of brought up, Danny, is that like I think I like the woodsman, but the lack of AP on basically everything except the dragon is something that I think you need to potentially look at just to be as competitive. Like if you want to just take the list as far as it could possibly go.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was thinking is this may be just how our game played out, but I'm not I wasn't overly sold on the illusion caster on Chariot, and I think I was going to recommend Elementalism, because once you get Plague of Rust off, then your 5 skirmishing high quality ballistic shooting units can really focus down whatever's been Plague of Rusted.
Yeah, and like the list I was playing with too had a lot of shooting in it, so having
Yeah.
like the sisters kind of already have their built-in AP, so they're
Sure.
generally fine. But having that extra would be able to, like, if there's a knight set a 2-up or 3-up save,
Yeah.
sisters would just go right through it. The woodsman would be able to do a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, once you take knights up to a 5-up save, like it's a whole different
Yeah,
ballgame.
and they're wounding that most knights on 3s for the woodsman.
Yeah, exactly, because they're
Yeah.
strength 4 too. So that's really good. Yeah, but then I think you need to change for sure your caster build. You shouldn't go with the
Yeah,
with
and I got to find
some.
somewhere to put the caster.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Enough Creation Warhost
Yeah.
talk. So on my end, it was pretty quiet. It's been like a long time between episodes because I was out of country on vacation with the family. Since I've gotten back, though, I have played 2 games. So I played the last game of the Old World Legends League. I finished off with a win against Cast Wars, and then that brought me. I think I finished 7th overall in the GT there, and top legacy faction. So I'm pretty happy about that. I think, like if sometimes people say that Old World is less of a competitive game than some of the other GW game systems out there. But, as I was thinking about this tournament, which was, which had a lot of really high skill competitive players show up to it. I think, what made the difference between for sure a top 5 finish and possibly a podium on my end was in one of my games, I misplaced a unit and had it wind blasted off the board. And if that hadn't happened, I potentially would have been on the podium, and that's over 6 games. So, that one error ended up costing me. So I think any time when you can sort of have that margin of making a mistake having such a large impact on the overall scoring over 6 games, I think it definitely reinforces, for me at least, that it's an extremely competitive game system if you want to play it that way. So that's sort of my takeaway for that. And then my other game, I just talked about it briefly there, but I played with Daniel. We were both practicing our lists that we're going to be using at a tournament that's coming up in the near future that I don't want to talk about too much right now. But it was a good positional game. I think, Danny, I think you'll agree. Like a lot of just measuring out ranges and moving around and trying not to give up points. And then it finished. Like we had to talk out the end of it, but it was a very tight, something like a 11-9 or maybe a 12-8.
Yeah, it was very close.
Type
It was
game.
It was still a really good game.
Yeah, it was a good game. Like I think it was a situation where I had the list advantage if I could find a way to deal with that dragon, and then I don't really have many great ways to deal with it on my end. So
Yeah.
that was sort of like your trump card in that
Yeah.
matchup. For sure.
For me, it's like the dragon. I'm still getting used to because I'm still used to. I've been running a bloodthirster for like a year, and
Yeah.
you got to be very careful with that. Where the dragon,
yeah.
I'm like, oh, it can have 3 armor saves or 3 armor save values. Oh, this is great.
Yeah, it can live through a lot of stuff, especially when
Yeah.
yours is like 9 wounds or whatever.
Yeah.
So, aside from that, I also painted up a unit of 5 Marauder Horsemen. And my heart goes out to all the Bretonnian and all cavalry players out there. I hadn't painted Cav for a while, and I just I remembered halfway through that unit how much of an extra pain in the butt it is to paint cavalry models versus models on foot. Yeah, not looking forward to the other, 15 mounted models that I have to paint in that army. And then also I finished the last of the Horus Heresy books. That's like my personal literary journey, I guess. So I finished off the Horus Heresy, all the short stories, everything, and now I'm in the Siege of Terra books. So that's another cool little hobby thing for me. Yeah, and that's it. Okay, let's move on. We don't have much news. There's been nothing official from Games Workshop over the last few weeks. Really, I guess we're going to have some news at the end of the month because there's Adepticon happening and there's going to be a preview there. I think everybody expects Beastman to be discussed at that point, and that's all well and fine. I think the only thing maybe I'll ask you guys' opinion on, starting with Ryan, is the have you looked at the Legacy faction pack that Val over from Squarebased is producing, and what are your thoughts on it?
I did look at it. I have no issue with the content in it. Like, he has done a very restrained job of just massaging what already exists to be more similar to the like hard copy published stuff in the game.
Sure, yeah.
I will spare the world my philosophical diatribe on whether or not it should have been done or it was the appropriate place or mechanism to do it. It's already been done, so none of that matters.
Fair. All right. And Danny, have you taken a look?
Yeah, I've taken a look. I guess, as Ryan's saying, like he hasn't changed too much. Like just kind of, as he said, massaged, which isn't a way I would describe it. But I do like how he was just kind of changing the force organization chart. I like how the army's built. So some armies removing the 1+, so like Ogre Kingdoms no longer are forced to take a unit of Ogre Bulls if they don't want to. I think Source Warriors aren't plus anymore. Just some like minimal things where it can kind of help the army a little bit, so you're not stuck taking units you didn't want to take. Demons, since that's the one I end up looking at the most. It has changed a couple times, but giving them a normal ward save versus the losing against magical attacks. I guess breathes some new life into them for at least some of the factions.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't remember if there was any changes to vampire counts, and if there was, it's very minimal. But there's some that have a little bit more changes, but they're all trying to keep them fairly the same, but just modifying the way you build your army a little different.
Can you go multiple greater demons under that pack?
Yeah, he did change it. So now before the official one is 1 greater demon in total. This is 1 per 1,000. So now if you want, you can spend your entire character allotment on 2 greater demons, which I think first thing I did was like, all right, let's put 2 bloodthirsters in the list and a bunch of furies, and that's pretty much gonna be my whole list, and maybe a couple skull cannons. But I don't think that'd be great because it would just run away and so we can easily kite those bloodthirsters.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, no, but at least it opens up like some of the builds that you'll see with the faction if people are playing with that pack. So that's cool. I've obviously taken a look. I exchanged some messages with Val also on like Chaos Dwarfs because that's like the faction I feel most comfortable being able to offer up some potential changes for. And I think you guys are right. I think it was it was Ryan who first said it was pretty restrained, and I agree. One thing I like when I read it at first, and then I sent my message to Val. I said, you're not the good news is the faction isn't any better than before you took a look at it, which is I think good. Like it's just opened up. It's just opened up builds and new options for things you could take in the list, which is always something that I'm happy to see. And I'm happy that it doesn't make the faction better. I don't think Chaos Dwarfs need that, and then I also don't think like from a legitimacy of the pack perspective, like you don't want to push legacy factions too hard because then I think you open yourself up to a lot more criticism. So I think that's good. And I guess my final hot take is regardless of what the pack says, I don't think the top end competitive lists are really gonna shift much because the changes that have been made sort of primarily on the Chaos Dwarf side anyways allow new things through changes to the force organization chart and but don't improve any of the sort of elements that were weaker in terms of internal balance, so it doesn't really overall change the list that much, I think. But it does bring some cool new options if you're not trying to to bring the most competitive list in the world that you can possibly make. So yeah, overall, I think a good job. Like Val is doing our Lord JTY's work there. I think like his actual job, frankly. So good on him for doing that. Okay, Ryan, you want to take us through some of the events that are coming up over the next few weeks in the area?
Yes. So I've got a lovely document here that's slowly spreading across the internet where all of these things are. So today in Gatineau, there was a 3-round tournament at FDB. I could probably remove that.
Yeah.
And then on the 23rd of March, out of the box in Bell's Corner, just outside Ottawa, there's a little 3-round 10-player event. 19-20 April in Mississauga will be the Squarebase GT Part 2, The Resurrection, at X Planet Games. That'll be 24 players and 5 rounds. 3-4 May here in Ottawa will be the Canhammer Team Tournament. I believe there's still 2 team spots left.
Yes.
Last time I looked. So two more teams of 4. It's a 4-player team tournament. We're years away from having enough terrain to actually shift to 8-player teams, and that's being put on by our erstwhile co-host Andrew. 24-25 May here in Ottawa again at the Rideau Curling Club. Is it the Curling Club? Yeah. We're having the Canadian Tabletop Championships Warhammer Open or Old World Open tournament. That's 32 players and 5 rounds. That's being TO'd by Danny, our occasional co-host.
Exactly.
2 weeks later, 7 to 8 June at the Nepean Sports Complex, also in the greater Ottawa area, will be the Ottawa Old World Grand Tournament, being kind of put on by Red Dragon and or its tournament running entity, but I'm TOing that one to give the other 2 a break. So that'll be a thing, and as of right now, we have space for 50 players, and therefore that will be a 6-round event. If we actually get more than 32 people to sign up.
Sure.
And then, of course, 23-24 August will be Capital City Bloodbath here in Ottawa. Details to follow, typically after the team tournament happens.
Yep.
That about covers everything in a big circle around Ottawa. I would also shout out, like, I'm not tracking them in this document that I'm maintaining, but there's also some events in Syracuse and Rochester for our upstate New York friends to check out. So
Good stuff. We have a pretty busy and awesome event schedule coming up here. I think it's like 3 GT equivalents over 6 weeks or whatever. It's going to be pretty wild.
yes, so between the start of May and the end of August, there's a GT-sized team tournament and 3 GT-sized events just
wild.
in the city of Ottawa.
Yeah, Nottingham's got nothing on us.
Apparently.
Apparently. Awesome. Good stuff. All right. Okay, let's move on to our main site. Oh, by the way, before I do move on, we're going to put this document online where people could peruse it and have a look if they're interested. So watch out in the show description after this. We'll make sure it's up there. Okay, so let's move on to our main segment for this evening, missions. So we're going to start by discussing missions as they currently stand. What the big blue rulebook missions are like, and then we'll move on to like the new narrative missions and stuff like that after. So yeah, let's start with the current mission. So I'm going to start with Danny on this. What are your overall thoughts on the missions as they currently stand in the big blue rulebook? What do you think is some of the design philosophy and some of the ideas behind them? And then do you think that they effectively support the overall theme and feel of the game?
For myself, the book, like the missions right out of the book, since they have a few different win conditions, I think it's mainly just the breakpoint one. The game stops when you get to the breakpoint, and then a few other missions have some random elements in them. The way you end up playing them, it doesn't really support, I guess, a tournament setting. So like they don't really work for those. But I think it is still a fun way to play the game if you're just having a pickup game and just rolling some dice. They're perfectly fine for that. But I know a lot of events we've altered some of the scenarios to make them a little bit better for events, so they're not so random, and change like breakpoint or I'm trying to think of the one where you roll for units coming in, like
Flank
removing
attack.
that, flank attack. So changing those so they're a little bit more effective. But I know if you were running an event and you wanted to use just the mission straight out of the book, you wouldn't be able to do a 20-0 system. You would have to just do a win-loss-draw kind of system with them, because there's so many different varied ways of how to play the missions. But generally, I think they do support how the game does work right now. Like, they're trying to keep it simple. The missions aren't overly complicated. They're mostly just, for the most part, killing each other. But I do like the missions. They're fine. There's enough variations between them to keep them fresh. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I'm going to skip over the little bit about how we need to adapt them for a competitive setting, because although I agree with you, we're going to talk about that bit a little bit more in detail later. But so overall, I'm happy with the missions in the Big Blue Rulebook. Like, I'm quite easy come, easy go as far as mission packs go. But I do enjoy this one. I think what I like the most about the big rulebook missions is that I think they support the overall design philosophy and theme of the game. So Old World very much harkens back to how GW used to design war games. Before, let's say, 8th edition 40K. So that going back, a decade almost at this point. Very much, I think their war games used to be a lot more influenced by RPGs, and especially used to simulate an actual battle much more than they do today. Whereas today, if you look at 40K or Age of Sigmar, you have games that I feel are way more influenced by board game design, by tradable card games, as well as your obviously video games, and that leads to a completely different game experience, which I don't think anymore tries to simulate or reflect a battle. And I think in that big vein of thought, like the missions that we have right now, where it's kill points based and it's based on destroying the enemy army, really I think supports how the game is built, and the missions don't lead to any sort of cognitive dissonance when you're playing, that you're like, why am I sending a unit to the back corner of the board to plant an invisible flag that doesn't exist to score points? Because I'm pretty sure if my 60 dwarves met 90 orcs on an open field, everybody would just be bashing everybody's skulls in until one side came off the winner. So I think like it all works together to make for a cohesive play experience. And yeah, I like the missions overall. What are your thoughts? Sorry, that was pretty long winded. I took you down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but what are your thoughts, Ryan?
No, I agree with pretty much all of that. Like ultimately, the core rulebooks missions were very clearly designed to be like a nice entry step to just playing the game, because ultimately, and we'll talk about this later when we get to discussions of competitive things, but like, there's a lot of different ways to play the game, and the missions needed to be able to accommodate a lot of different ways of interacting with the hobby. So them being simple, relatively streamlined, relatively straightforward, but also at the same time, they put in the time and effort to tie every single one of those missions to like a sort of narrative story that can go with that mission. And I thought they did a very good job. And like, I have a background in historical games and things like that, so I'm a giant nerd about this stuff. But like, I find all of the missions in their own way do a good job of not simulating, but like capturing the essence of the type of engagement they're supposed to be reflecting.
Yep.
So like the meeting engagement mission, which is the one where reserves occur randomly.
Yeah.
The randomness is not cool from a gaming perspective, but the design of the mission where like you have two forces that are kind of meeting at an angle and not everything's on the table because you basically had your vanguard smash into their vanguard and now you're scrambling, do you withdraw and set up a defensive? Do you commit into the attack? Or, do you just fight a skirmish and then you kind of back off of each other? Like, that mission plays that well. Just
Yep.
like pitched battle plays that well. Flank attack, it's a little weird because like the table's not big enough to represent a flanking
Agreed.
with the scale we're using. But whatever. It's fine. But so like they all work, they all do what they're supposed to do from a like telling a story. This just ties back to your game design pulled from RPG elements in a way, is like you can put things on the table and you can very rapidly create a narrative about what's happening on the table without a lot of outside input, just based on what mission you have and what decisions you make following that.
Yeah.
So I think they're all quite good in that way, but to echo Danny's points is like they're not all necessarily useful in other settings like tournaments and whatnot.
Agreed.
That's it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think like we were both sort of hinting at the same thing here is that, I think the great success with this mission pack is that you have a cohesive experience from your like list design through the game, like the rule system, and then the missions reflect sort of how all of that culminates on the battlefield, and it's all like cohesive. It all locks up together and it all makes sense. So I think that's kind of the success that we're both hitting on here.
Yep.
So okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, so yeah, I'll take the next one. There's been a lot of I think we've all seen some complaints online about the mission pack being kind of samey, and I wanted to know. I'll start off here, but I wanted to know what you guys thought about a year in. Are you still having fun with these missions? And then do you think that SDS should be putting out a new mission pack? So, from my perspective, I kind of have a bit of an issue with this complaint. I play the game, I don't know, about on average 1 to 2 times, or maybe 3 games every 2 weeks, and I've played over the last year, not counting events. And in that time, I've never really felt like, oh god damn it, I'm playing another flank attack mission. I'm just done with this mission. Like, it's never something that's come up. And I know that I play more than most people out there, and if you're playing, I don't know, 2 games a month or something, and it takes you 3 or 4 months to see that a mission come up again, I'm not sure how the sameness would really be that much of a factor. I guess for me, like, Ludo narratively, as I mentioned before, it all makes sense that when we would show up on an open field, figuratively speaking here, like the 2 sides of 30 or 50 models would probably just be bashing their skulls in, and I'm happy that the mission started to do that for me. So it all kind of makes sense. And then just closing off here with, do I think that SDS should be putting out a new mission pack? I mean, sure, and I'll happily play them if they do. But from my perspective, it's not like I'd much rather see a points adjustment or maybe some rules being looked at rather than them focusing on missions at this point. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
So, yeah, I kind of take issue with that complaint as well because, like, first off, it's a very modern or very, very recent thing for any tabletop game to have more than a handful of missions. And the only reason something like 40K wound up with a billion missions is because all they did was just take all the different variables that could exist in a mission, made them discrete and elements, and now because you can stack deployment, terrain layout,
Secondaries.
primary mission and special rule together, like, and because there's like 5 or 6 of each of those, like, you multiply, was it like,
Yeah.
that adds up to like
A millionfold, yeah.
mission. Like, so but the thing is all but the irony is you look at that and people are like, oh, this game has so few missions compared to, say, 40K. But in reality, when you look at, say, like 40K tournaments, there's still only like 5 or 6 missions actually being used because someone went and just combined the rules back together into a handful of functional, non-shitty missions. So we're not playing like Servo Skull Soccer.
Yes.
And, went from there. So, like, yes, and like, I'm in the same boat as you. I play about a game a week, and I've yet to get bored of the missions, but that's because ultimately all of the missions are just different flavors of how do I kill the other guy. So the challenge is not how do I engage with the mission, the challenge is how do I overcome my opponent? And my opponent is different every single time, and therefore is a new and different challenge. And no amount of deployment zone rejigging or additional VP adding points on the ground or whatever is, like, unless you literally get away from the essence of the game, which is fight the other army until you have routed them, because that's how you won medieval battles.
Exactly.
You're not going to get away from that, or you're going to create a game that will go down that board game track to no longer reflect the essence of what this project is. And, like, ultimately there's a giant tension in the community between the fact that Warhammer the Old World is a revival of classic 90s, early 2000s style tabletop wargaming, especially in the historical fantasy space. But it is also, but there is a tension between that and the desire for modernity that are a bit at odds at times. And I think sometimes people need to just let the game be what it is, instead of trying to like we have Age of Sigmar. If you want to play a modern fantasy game, it exists.
Yeah.
Like,
agreed.
but the more you push the button to be like, we need to make this more like other things, you run the risk of losing the essence of what Warhammer Fantasy Battles, inclusive of TOW, is or was.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think I'll keep, because we're gonna talk later on about if the game should move towards more objective based missions. So I'll save my comments for that bit. But like, know that I basically hard agree with everything you just said. What about you on this one, Danny?
For me, like, yeah, I feel like I've started to play a bit more games now. But like the missions, like they are just for the most part kill each other, like kill your opponent. That's the mission. But yeah, the difference is your opponent's army is going to be completely different each time. I guess if you are playing the same opponent every week,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
yeah, sure, that then it's going to be the same thing, and you want a new mission to kind of vary it up. But then at the same point, could you guys bring different lists to kind of change things up, or switch armies for the week to kind of change things up? But honestly, the missions, as long as they don't start doing what they did in 40k, for me anyways, like when I stopped playing 40k, they went really heavy into the secondaries, like faction secondaries. You had the seasons secondaries, which became a little more troublesome because I was only playing like once a month. And then I would go to an event every quarter, and I would show up to an event, and I'm like, what were the missions I should be taking with secondaries? And then I would pick secondaries, and I would lose the game when I picked my secondaries because I picked the wrong one.
Yeah.
Which for me, I just got frustrated eventually. I was like, I can't do this game anymore because like I'm just not up to. It's not like I'm not playing enough to know the missions inside and out like other people, which is a whole game in itself. It's just knowing the missions. No, other than with Old World, anyways, you can have your faction, you can play them, and even if you take like 6 months off, and you know the missions are still going to be fairly the same, you're still going to be killing your opponent. So you can kind of still just jump back in and like, okay, let me just get a quick refresh on the rules and I'm good to go, which is something nice about the game.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I fully agree with you on that one, Danny. Yeah, no, this is good. I forgot what I was going to say, but that's fine. Okay. I had you jogged something in my head and then I lost it when I was still listening to you. So anyways, we'll keep going. That's fine. Okay. So, Ryan, what are some of the specific challenges or issues that you see with the existing missions that are in the books? And then how have you seen those issues get addressed, or how would you suggest that we resolve those?
Okay. I'm going to caveat my answer here with I actually don't think any of the missions have an issue if you are just playing like one-off games with people at the store in your basement. They're all perfectly fine for that exact purpose. Where they have an issue is if you attempt to use them in any sort of league or tournament or something where like the outcome of the mission other than having a winner and a loser matters, like the gradation of winning matters. And that's where they start to have problems. And also, like, I just hate randomness for the sake of randomness, so I'm just going to shit on meeting engagement repeatedly. But
Sure.
like, so where I see the friction points with the missions is principally where they did things like have randomness for randomness, like just rolling on all of your reserves and acting like your army is not a cohesive thing that was maneuvering through space before the battle, is weird. Like it didn't make any sense to me. And again, I come from games that have mandatory reserves, and then you just build knowing you may have to have 25% of your army in reserve, so you just plan for it. As opposed to, oh, I'm gonna roll dice. Shit, everything's in reserve except my war machines. Well, I guess I die now. So like that's not great. And then Breakpoint, I actually think Breakpoint's a really good mission. It's just completely useless in the differential tournament format, scoring format, because there's no way to like, since you just win, what like you achieve the criteria and you just win. is not great. But like other than that, like pitch battle's fine, mountain pass is fine. Flank attack, I don't really have any issues with from like a playability perspective. What's the fourth one? Or the other one?
Watchtower.
And the Watchtower, yeah. The Watchtower, my only issue with it is that I don't like garrisonable buildings. I find they just have a whole bunch of issues. But I liked Andrew's solution of just it's a hill. It's just king of the hill.
Yep.
But I find like the tower's not worth enough points to actually make you want to take it. So like if you were talking about a pure win-loss-draw scenario, like not a non-differential situation, the tower is not worth enough points to turn, like to give you like a Pyrrhic victory.
Mhm.
Like if you're losing and you take the tower, you're still losing. Generally. Unless you, but like in the differential format, yes, you might turn a 10-10 into an 11-9, or something like that with those 200 points. And I definitely think if people are going to use that mission in a tournament setting, the amount of points you need to turn a 10-10 into an 11-9 should probably consider how many points you can get from things like the bonus victory points of taking the tower or whatever.
Sure.
Well, because that way, at least if you get a perfect tie and you take the tower, then at least you win the mission. Which is a thing. But as to how to fix them, because I've been fucking the guy behind everyone trying to do that anyway, like to fix them for a competitive format, a tournament format, or even just a disengaging with the randomness format, like meeting engagement was relatively easily fixable by keeping the mandatory reserve, but making it a minimum of 1 unit up to a certain percentage of your force or what have you. We actually debated back and forth on whether we should ditch the mandatory reserve or not. I personally think the mandatory reserve better reflects the nature of a meeting engagement as a type of battle, as opposed to just a diagonal, very close starting pitched battle where everything starts on the table.
Sure.
So that was my 2 cents on that. Breakpoint, I think, Danny, are you using my breakpoint modification at CTC, or was that the 6th mission that you're not using?
I have to double check. You keep talking, I'll
Okay.
look that up.
Okay, but anyway, I have a modified version of Breakpoint where you play the whole battle, and basically you just get a bunch of BP if you broke your opponent. But if you also become broken, then neither of you get those points.
Sure.
So it's just, I think I want to say it was like 300 points or something like that, that you get for achieving the break condition, but the game doesn't end immediately. So those are kind of my like minor fixes. And as I said, the other 4 missions I don't really have a problem with, other than maybe increasing how many points you get off of the key terrain piece in capture and control.
Yeah, and making it a hill in most cases. Yeah.
Or making it anything. Like
Sure.
it actually doesn't matter what it
Forest
is.
or
It
whatever,
could
just
literally
not
be,
a building.
yeah. It could literally just be hold the center of the table. Like it doesn't even have to be a terrain feature.
Fair. No, that makes sense. Danny, have you want to keep looking, or are you ready to go?
Yeah, good. I didn't take that one. So the ones I ended up taking for the modified were command and control, flank attack, meeting engagement, mountain pass, and open battle.
Cool.
Sure. What are your thoughts on some of the issues with the or potential issues?
Okay.
With the mission?
So most of the missions, as Ryan said, like they're great for just pickup games, like for that. And they definitely don't fit the the differential for some of them, anyways. Like Breakpoint, as you said. Like, I guess if you there's like I know Ryan's been a lot more into this. Like for me, I'm definitely starting to lean away from the 20-0 system for running events, just because it does allow you to run different missions.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We could talk about that at some point in the future, but okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But for fixing missions, like fixing those particular missions, Ryan, you've been kind of, like, I guess, behind the scenes doing a lot of modifications. I've tried a few myself, trying to do some different things at local events, and I just kind of, as someone who has spent some time creating some missions, and then as a TO walking around and then checking out how people were doing with those missions, and find out that no one actually bothered to
Read
read
them.
the mission and just did their own thing, and that gets very frustrating. So like you can't make them too complicated. Like they have to be pretty much the missions out of the book, otherwise people are just gonna gloss over them and be like, oh yeah, okay. And then they get to round 2 and they just think it's the same as round 1 or something. And
Or you have to give them new names.
yes, completely new names, but even still, people, like, again, an event I ran,
Yeah.
people were running the wrong missions,
person.
wrong points for things, and I'm like, that there was a difference between the missions, and that's just more for me TOing, I think, and just trying to explain to the people beforehand to read the pack.
Yes, well,
But-
that specific person will never do that. So
Yes. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Sorry, were you done there, Danny?
Yeah, I'm all good here.
Yeah. So on my end, I kind of agree. I think with Ryan overall, in that I think all of the missions are completely fine if you're playing a one-off pickup game or you're playing against your buddy or whatever. And then if there's one that you don't like, you just re-roll and pick another one. Like that's totally fine, and they all work. I have the same potential issues that you've seen and that you've addressed largely, I think, Ryan, in terms of meeting engagements. Obviously, with the randomness is a bit rough when you're showing up to like a high level competitive event. And that's easily fixable, as you mentioned. Breakpoint again is just weird because it scores completely different than the other missions, which is annoying if you're going to run it in a tournament. But I think is fixable as you've demonstrated. And then the only thing from like a just thematic feel perspective that I like to see changed is again the watchtower for some other piece of terrain that's interactable with that you can climb on or move through or whatever. I think just makes for a much better play experience rather than a cat and mouse chase around the tower. So yeah, I think those are pretty small friction points that can be fixed pretty easily. So I don't have too much to complain about on these. So let's move on to something we already sort of touched on before, but I think is a really like interesting point of discussion, and there's some tension about this in the community, as Ryan hinted at. Let's start with Danny. Like, what are your thoughts on the game transitioning towards more objective-based missions, as you'd see in AOS or in 40K, rather than kill points based systems as you do, or missions as you do see in the old world?
So it kind of reminds me of like older, like if you do, depends on how you're doing the objectives, to be honest. If you're doing like a progressive scoring or just at the end of the game, whoever's holding the objective, because those are both, I guess, holding the objective is more like the old style way where you just end the game with the objective, you win, which does run into issues of, okay, instead I'm just going to build a super tanky unit and I'm just going to try to survive. But luckily, with the old world, they do have like the pushback, which does help make it a little bit more exciting, where you can win a combat and slowly push someone off, which kind of keeps things fresh. Versus old editions, where I'm just gonna sit on an objective and I don't get pushback because I'm unbreakable, or I have a rerollable leadership 10. I think I'm still a little, unless GW changes how they do objectives, I'm still for just the killing each other. And as well, I guess you need to know how many points these objectives are going to be. Are they actually going to be worthwhile? Are they going to be the only way you get points from the mission? Or do you still kill for the missions? But then that gets into how you comparing that with other missions in that event pack, or how the win works. I'm still leaning towards against them unless they're very balanced, but I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to say I still prefer the way it is right now because it kind of rewards you for killing stuff versus just building super defensively, and it kind of changes how the game plays in generally, where you can just, I'm worried that someone's going to build lists where they just like, I don't engage with you, I just sit on objectives and that's my whole game plan. which I don't think is as fun of a way to play the game. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, sorry, I agree with you on this one. I think I know that there's like a significant subset of the community that sees objective-based missions as more, tactical, strategic, or whatever, of a way to play, and sort of complains about that. Personally, I'm not a fan. I think it would be a mistake for the game to transition towards more of an objective-based mission style. Like it doesn't fit with the overall theme of what sort of the medieval fantasy type battle that you're going with. Overall in the game system. I also think that like the scale, this is something that Ryan mentioned earlier when he was talking about, I think, flank attack. In terms of the boards that we're using aren't big enough for us to simulate complex things in terms of missions, right? They're not big enough to flank in this case, but I think more broadly, the scale that we play at, where you have this 6x4 board with I don't know, anywhere from 50 to 120 models on the table, is just not the scale that you need to represent like these massive strategic movements and thoughts about capturing things that or doing things at the operational level or whatever that will impact battles. Like it just doesn't make sense, right? Like any battle you look at with so few models involved or individuals, it's just going to be a good old mash them up. And I think that if you try to shoehorn these very complex objective based missions at such a small scale, you always lose something in terms of what the game is representing, and you move away from the game actually simulating a battle. And then I think you fall, and I hate to make like a slippery slope argument here, but like you quickly fall down the road of like it becomes more of a board gamey feel of like you must accomplish these actions to win the game rather than you have to beat the opponent in a battle. So I think for my part anyways, it would be a big mistake to move in that direction. I'm not saying that obviously you can't have some sort of secondary objective or whatever to spice up the mission, whatever you want, right? Win challenges to score points, or I don't know, push the opponent off the board, or whatever the hell you want to put in there. That's completely fine. But I think just moving to hold these points on the map or do these actions would just be a big mistake. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
So overall, I agree. The primary scoring method of the game ought to generally remain kill points. Like, not to go on my whole rant about what the game is trying to simulate, but generally, like, pitched battles like we play in the medieval period that this fantasy game is heavily borrowing from were incredibly rare, and they were not maneuver activities. Like, they were the termination or culmination of a maneuver activity. So generally what happened was one or the other side gained a positional advantage at like the higher level and then shaped the enemy army into fighting them on the terrain that was advantageous to them. And then you had a battle. But the battle wasn't about the battle wasn't the like World War II style, I need to seize this intersection to cut off the withdrawal. Like, it was literally just, okay, cool, I'm here, you're there. We're going to go fight each other in this big field now. And then whoever doesn't run away first now owns all of the land they can see, including the elephant graveyard. Like, that's
Yes.
that's not to be like incredibly reductive of medieval battles, but like it was literally just find a place to fight, be the person that had the advantage there, and then stab a bunch of dudes until one of you wins.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think your Ryan, if I can jump in for a sec, like I think
Yep.
your World War II example makes total sense. Like seizing that intersection or seizing that airfield or that port, like makes a whole lot of sense when you've got hundreds of thousands, millions of individuals across a continent spanning, area of operations doing stuff. But like it always feels super shoehorned when, you and I are playing a game on a 6x4 with a handful of models each, right? Like, yeah, sure, you can you can say like, oh yeah, this is part of a bigger thing, but without having that bigger campaign to sort of lean on, it just, for me anyways, it always feels like it's yeah, it feels completely shoehorned, really.
but like ultimately, like not to go full like army nerd on stuff, but like medieval battles were not like the way, the army has taught me to plan battles, where we identify key terrain, we find ways to seize the key terrain, and then we continue moving down the map, seizing key terrain and removing the enemy from it as we go. That was not
Exactly.
how warfare happened prior to like,
World War II. Yeah.
yeah, like basically World War II.
Yeah.
Or the Spanish Civil War maybe. But like um and so it was one of those, it's one of those things where like what this game is, the battle we are trying to have is the pitched battle where like we've decided where the fight's going to happen and we're doing the fight.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Exactly.
and so ultimately I believe objectives, like, okay, objectives as points on the ground that you secure or whatever, um, are a viable secondary mission option, but should never supplant kill points as the primary scoring option, for fear of going down that thing I discussed earlier of like losing the essence of what this game is. Um, and like you see it in, if you look at the missions that I helped create for Danny for CTC, like you'll see things like, okay, it's not an objective, but one of the missions you score extra points for like physically occupying more terrain pieces than the other player. So forest or like whatever, it's just an arbitrary thing. Um, or like I guess what I'm getting at is like there's ways to have positional scoring that aren't like a circle on the map of like I
Sure.
stand here and I collect resource. Um, it's like you can do things like, you know, which army has more units or banners or unit strength in the opposing army's deployment zone at the end of the game. Or the opponent's table half. Or like there's ways to have secondaries that are objectives that aren't go here, stand on this thing, and wait. And additionally, like objectives is also a thorny issue because there's 3 different ways you can score them. There's progressive, which simulates nothing. Like progressive objectives are literally just spreadsheet farming the game. Even though they are probably fairer in a gamey sense, they are from a like verisimilitude sense, like battles are not won by standing on circle number 1 longer, generally.
Exactly. For more
Um,
turns. Yeah.
yeah. But then the other way you can take objectives at the end of the battle. So at the end of an arbitrary amount of time, the person that holds this thing gets a bunch of points. The problem is that puts a whole bunch of benefits on the player going last, generally. Because especially with TOW's pushback mechanics,
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah, for
very,
sure.
very easy to hammer a unit, make sure you have enough combat res to win the combat, force them to give ground. Now it's your objective. And like literally you could play the entire game doing nothing but conserving your combat power until like turn 6 or turn 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
and just hammering people off objectives like a game of curling. I realize this got real Canadian real fast, but it's fine. And just winning the game by just doing that hammer action, which would be unfun for everyone. And of course, lastly, there's the Flames of War style sudden death mission objectives where you win on or after a certain turn by taking the objective and possessing it for an entire turn. Which is actually my preferred mode of objective in Maneuver Warfare Era and beyond games, but is not suitable for what we are trying to do here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and can be a bit
like
feels
full
batty.
notes of my rant.
It can be a bit feels batty when there's a lot of limitations on how you can move and employ the units too.
Exactly. Like when all your units are like moving on railroad tracks, it would be real shitty to be like, "Oh, you lose because I just drove onto your objective and there was no way for you to stop me."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so let's not do that.
Okay, so all right, I think we're all in favor of kill points missions remaining the norm. We got super nerdy about mission design here, but that's fine. And warfare in general, but that's fine. Let's move on to the new narrative missions that GW put out on the 25th of February. Starting with Ryan, like, what are your overall thoughts on this pack of 3 missions that SDS put out? Do you like the kinds of ideas that there are in the missions, and then are you planning to play them yourself?
So I actually really like all of these, but I also liked all of the missions that were in the Arcane Journals.
Okay.
Because like they're just all decent narrative missions. Like they're all built around telling a story with a battle. Yes, you can adapt them to any scenario, but like they all come with recommended what army should be on each side, and the objectives are very much like destroy Elven Waystone or like literally seizing a beach landing site. Like they're very like, I guess what I'm getting at is the missions tell the story that they want to tell very easily. If you gave me these missions without any of the flavor text, I would still be able to tell what military activity was happening
Sure.
with that. And so I like the fact they have a nice spread of things. They have a 500 point mission, they have a typical 2,000 point mission, and I want to say one of them's like a 3,000 point mission.
Well, it's multiple players as optional.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what it is. But no, my apologies to the people of Kingston that I've been yelling at about 500 point games. But ultimately, I'm not the biggest fan of Seize the Tower because I think the game breaks down under like 1,250 points,
Sure.
and that the band-aids included in the mission are not enough. But that's also a whole like, I have this whole thing where like I play games for certain experiences. So if I wanted to play a skirmish game, I would play a skirmish game. I wouldn't use a massed battles game to play a skirmish. So that's the thing. But upon Shrouded Shores, big fan. The beach objective one.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing, like they use objective strength or unit strength for securing the objectives, and they have like minimum sizes on how to do it. Like I love all of that. The only thing I really don't like is that the objectives are basically worth doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Like the most points you can get is 200 points if you secured all 3 objectives as the attacker. And you start with 2 of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, so like that's kind of a wash. But again, these are narrative missions. Like they're not intended to be rolled into competitive play, even though they may give us ideas for things. But like they do a good job of doing exactly what it says on the label, which I'm very happy with.
That makes sense. Danny, what are your thoughts?
For me, like I've been enjoying them. Like I haven't played them. Just I've enjoyed reading through them and getting the idea of playing through them because that's one thing I kind of regretted during 8th edition was not playing through all the narrative missions and just only ever playing the ones out of the rulebook. Like, and yeah, so I really want to play more of the narrative missions themselves. Try to get more out of the game than just the one way to play. Like the 500 point Seize the Tower, it does completely change how you would play. Like I understand that things aren't going to work too well. Like you could bring some like overly defensive unit, and there's probably some ways to skew it. But on average play, like if you just build a 500 point list, it's gonna be wonky how you even make it work, or even how the game's gonna play. And luckily, it's a quick game. 500 points, hopefully hour at most, maybe an hour and a half, because it's gonna be a little different. But it's a fun way to play the game, just in general. But
All gyrocopters.
yeah, that's okay. So there's like those. Yeah, that's the skews that like that's just not gonna be a fun time. Like you could do something like that, or
I'd
I
have
don't
to
know.
look at the muster list to see if you can do that. But regardless,
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think they have them in core for the one army of infamy.
Yeah,
But
okay.
I
Yeah.
think it's just a new way of playing it, and just I do kind of like asymmetrical deployments. Like I know I don't use them for events, but like for a way to play the game as a pickup game, having different deployments, different objectives. Sometimes I would like to see that, where one player has to do A objective and player B has to do this, and kind of changes how the game plays.
Oh, just wait for it. That's totally happening in June.
Fair.
Probably. And I in 6th edition they had some really wonky ones that were just not balanced in the rulebook, where like you just didn't play them because like one person's defending and the other person gets to outflank their armies on the sides like turn 2, and it's not fun. But it was, if you were just having a game for a night with some beers or whatever, like that'd be fine for that. But not if you want a balanced play experience for both players. But I'm excited to play these. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like overall, I'm really happy that SDS put this pack out. For I think like two main reasons. Like I like that there's a lot of new ideas, or let's say returning ideas, or sometimes new ideas in these missions from other game systems. So that's super cool. And yeah, that's like the thing that I really like about them. I also like that there's a very specific narrative to them. I like the fact that the whole mission set is centered around Friedel the Chainmaker and her marauders or her wolves of the sea, basically just assaulting this island that's garrisoned by a Seaguard garrison, and just having those two armies of infamy, basically push the narrative and sell the story. I think that works super well, and I think if you're going to be doing narrative missions, they kind of need to be at least explained like that and told as a story through that lens. So I'm super happy to see that. So yeah, going back, I really like the new ideas, and we'll cover them when we get to the actual missions there. And I probably won't play this 3-pack of missions. However, like I'm happy that they exist, and people in our community are playing them out. Like I don't know if you guys saw, but a few days ago there was a pair of guys there that posted on our Discord about how they tried out the 500 point mission, doing a few different things with it, and like so people are actually playing these missions, and I'm happy that those options are out there, even if I may not necessarily play them in this exact manner. So for me, it's all positive. So let's move on to the first scenario, which is Seize the Tower, the 500 point mission. Like we're not gonna read through these like in entirety, but just a few thoughts on this one, like from. I'll kick us off here. I think like the Seize the Tower mission it has a nice sort of narrative wrapping around it, in terms of like, yeah, this is Friedel and her marauders, seizing some watchtowers that the High Elves have placed around their island to warn them off against intruders. But really, it's not a narrative mission. It's actually a 500 point game mode for the game, which I'm happy exists. Like I think I agree with Ryan that a lot of stuff will break down at that points level. That being said, I'm happy that they changed the muster lists to, for example, having no more than 25% of your points in a single character, for instance, just to sort of make it more easily workable at that points level. They modified the board size, which also will definitely help. And then they changed the values, obviously, the secondary objectives, which like Slay the Warlord, for instance, which will make it make sense at a 500 point level. So I think it's good that it exists. It's good that they've codified some way for you to play at 500 points that makes more sense than just taking the regular force army composition lists and then just but only bringing 500 points. Like that's all great. It can also be a cool way of introducing a buddy to the game. Like there's a point where they start building their army and they're not close to having a 2,000 point army ready yet, but you could do a smaller game and just learn through, like, use it as a learning mechanism or just an introduction, like until they get their full army ready. So overall, I like it. I mean, I'm probably not gonna play it, but it's good that it's been codified as a way to play the game. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
No, so I agree that it's neat that it exists and it's handy in those situations where people have not built enough things yet or whatever. However, I think the only way to approach it is from like an incredibly, I don't want to use the term casual, but casual. Like if you attempt to play this to win, it's very easy to break. And that's the so there's been an ongoing discussion where I am hanging out right now about doing this, and it's just led to list building that concluded like if I just rock up with a bunch of thunderers and shoot you to death,
Sure.
woohoo! But like it's great it exists. It's neat. It's probably a nice way to play a small game. Personally, unless you like twist my arm, I will probably never do it because if I want to play a skirmish game or a small skirmishy activity, I'm going to go play Infinity instead because I'm here to play Warhammer to play like massed battles activities. That's just my personal preference. I was never a fan of like Combat Patrol for 40k either. Way back in, was it 4th edition? It's just like I have different games for different experiences, and playing the old world at this size with a bunch of band-aids on it just doesn't do anything for me.
It's a fair take. What are your thoughts, Danny?
For me, like I was playing, I guess, Fantasy during 6th edition a lot, and there's a game mode in that. It's, I guess, 4 smaller games called Warbands, and it was meant for people starting off armies and to start building their collections to get a little bit higher. And this is, I guess, a good alternative for now for this edition, where it is a way to play the game just as an intro. I think it'd be good for anyone that buys like the battalion boxes, where it mostly comes with core, maybe 1 or 2 specials, like the high elf box, mostly core, the 2 chariots, or warriors, same idea. So it's kind of a good place to, like, you buy your battalion, you buy a character model, and then you can play this game. So it's good for like intro games, learning the game. You don't need a full table to play as well. Like I think these are on the Kill Team or those cardboard boxes from Warcry and stuff. So like it is a good way for new players to play. But yeah, if anyone that's played a lot of 2,000 point games, or the game is going to be easily broken. Like I'm sure you can easily find a skew, as Ryan mentioned earlier, or just like either all Thunderers or just take a bunch of stuff with 2+ saves, or bring something with T6 somehow, and no one's gonna have fun. I'm sure there's a way to get it in there. So like as soon as you do that, it's not gonna be. I mean, if you're driving out to play these games and someone's skewed it, I think you're kind of ruining everyone's experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's not there for that. Like it's there for intro and just kind of getting things going.
Yeah. Okay, all right. I'll turn. Let's go to the second one then, which is a little bit more of a narrative mission. I'll punt it over to Ryan to kick us off with Upon Shrouded Shores.
Yes. This one I actually kind of like, the beach landing mission. So again, it's got a very nice story about the situation where the Warriors of Chaos are landing on the beach and the High Elves are defending. It's a whole thing. Although from a game mechanics perspective, I actually do not understand what the objectives are representing. Although,
Sand, the beach.
well, no, like actually, I'm now realizing, like, I don't know if anyone, like, I'm old. If anyone played Company of Heroes,
Yeah,
the actual
yeah.
beach landing mission is exactly this, where you have to secure 2 points across the
sand
first
thingy.
barricade on the beach, and then you have to secure 1 central point in depth. So, okay, cool. We're invading Normandy. It's a thing, but like I like the mission. Like I like, you've got Warriors of Chaos. They're attacking the High Elves. Um, we've got terrain. I'm just skimming through all of it real quickly. I think the only thing I don't specifically like about the nature of this mission is that the defender has the initiative. So, like, yes, I get classic wargaming trope, but like the defender gets to deploy their entire army. The attacker gets to react to that, and then the defender gets to go first. Sure, like it makes sense in a way. Like the defender has the advantage of being the force in place, and the advantage of being the one shooting at the people landing on the beach. So narratively, it all makes sense. It's I don't know how you could do anything with this scenario other than play the quote unquote historical reenactment. Because of how, like, if you were just rolling off and it's like, oh, my Bretonians are the defender, well, shit. Um,
Yeah.
so like, it's a great mission for what it is, which is a simulation of a type of event, but you have to build, like, the attacker and defender kind of have to know who they are and build their forces knowing what role they are. Otherwise, it will turn into a very shit game very quickly. But that's what scenarios are supposed to be. Like,
Yeah.
so like it's a very good scenario, and I'd love to play it sometime with my Wolves of the Sea that I haven't finished building. But at the same time, it's so narrow in scope that it's also only really useful for playing itself, which is not like I don't know. I'm in this weird spot with, like, I play mostly pickup games and tournaments. I don't really have people that I'm like, let's do scenarios. Nor do we even have enough, like, army depth across our typical group of players to have that type of activity. Um, which is funny because, again, coming from historical games, I actually love scenarios. I love asymmetrical games. I love, like, having a interesting problem to solve. But this mission suffers from the same problem of the mission is not worth enough points. Just go kill the elves.
Which is
The
just good
objective,
life advice in general.
it's true. I mean, they're haughty and no one likes
Whoa,
them.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
But fuck off, Danny. But it's one of those things where, like, over 200 victory points, who cares?
Yeah.
My Wolves of the Sea are going to just run across no man's land and
Murder
stab
everybody.
some elves.
Yeah.
Like, and because of the layout of the objectives, like, it's also the situation where, like,
if the attacker seizes the initiative and just pushes, no matter what, they're going to have 2 objectives. And if they take the third one, like, it's just kind of like a pressure wins more situation. But again, like, it's a very good scenario for what it is. I need to stop applying my I play in a lot of tournaments brain to it. It's a perfectly fine representation of a beach landing. Yes, that's my rant.
All right, Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So for me, like as soon as you go to narrative missions, I feel like you and your opponent have to kind of discuss what your plans are for the mission. You can't just like show up with a game, because if one, like I've always found an issue with if you have a scenario where one player has to get to the other side of the table to control an objective. As soon as you play dwarves, I guess they're a little bit better now with marching column in the old world. You also have the Bugsman cart
Yeah.
to kind of help out, and there's double moves now, which definitely does help. But I remember writing scenarios and I'm like, oh, I can't do that because dwarves exist, so they can't really get to the other side unless that's all they're doing all game. So like, yeah, that's always an issue. And if you talk to your opponent, you kind of like, as Ryan mentioned, like defending an objective with knights doesn't really make too much sense. Like I feel like if you were, there'd be more war machines, maybe some more ranged and like counter charge kind of units, which I guess they do have counter charge, but like
thematically not the
yeah,
rule.
yeah, not that way. Yeah, it does. Yeah, thematically, but I would prefer the scenarios like the objectives as well be more like the defender wins as long as the attacker is not in their deployment zone or have a certain amount of units in their deployment zone, or if as long as the defender controls that objective by the end of the game, they just win. Just to make it like a cut and dry, like they really need to hold this objective, and the attacker really needs to get that, really push for that, because everyone could just leave the objectives and not make much of a difference. Or the attacker could just leave his and just go murder the elves.
Yeah.
And they still wouldn't get too much from losing those objectives.
Yeah.
I think those objectives just need to be worth a lot more if they're really trying to push this idea of these things being really valuable.
Yeah, I think perhaps we're like Ryan was saying, we're looking at this a little bit too hard from the perspective of how this would play out in events. As you were hinting at there, like Danny, if you're going to play these narrative scenarios, you've got to like also play it narratively and not just be like, what is the way that I can as quickly as possible win this game, right? If you're going to sort of take them on wholesale, like you mentioned, talk to your opponent and then play it in a narrative manner for sure.
It's definitely going to go better if you and your opponent discuss, like, okay, thematically, what would I have? Okay, no, you shouldn't take that unit. Like, it will help out for better experience for getting these kind of games.
For sure. Yeah. Like when I look at this mission, like this one, compared to the first one, which was like a new game mode at 500 points, like this one feels like a narrative mission for me. And I guess the way I'm looking at this one and the next one from a narrative perspective is less from a narrative perspective and more as what can we take from them, because there's a bunch of new ideas in here. There's like for instance, there's objective play with I think they got progressive scoring on this one. There's random game length. There's the defender deploying first but then also going first. There's certain unit types like core in this case that could score objectives. So there's a bunch of new ideas that are in this mission, and I tend to look at it more as like what can people like the two of you take out of this mission and perhaps sprinkle in a more competitive scenario or a more competitive event pack, and just like have something to spice up the existing missions. So like there's a lot of ideas in here. I'm not sure that they would all apply and that you could all use them at the sort of the nitty gritty competitive level. But for instance, something like random game length, I wouldn't do it across all your missions, but perhaps have one mission like, I don't know, Breakpoint or something, or just to spice up your open battle mission. Like, we don't know how many turns this one is going to be exactly, which will have an impact on how aggressively players play out their game. I think is like an interesting, obviously not a new idea in wargaming, but like a new idea in the old world that could be brought on, for instance. So like, I just like that there's a lot of new little bits and bobs that are jammed into this mission that you guys could potentially pull out and throw at your at other existing packs. So I'm all for it. I mean, the overall scenario of seizing a beach like is cool from a narrative perspective. If you're playing this with your buddy and you're going through this 3 scenarios, like it perfectly represents that happening, I think, or at least it sells the story of that happening. So I'm fine with it from a narrative perspective, and I just like that there's a lot of new ideas being introduced. Okay, Danny, you want to give us your thoughts on the 3rd scenario, the toppling of the Waystones?
Sure. So this mission allows you to play, I guess, 2v2 or 1v1 or 3v3. It kind of just says you can include multiple armies, but it's suggesting that each one is 2,000 points. It's not. I feel like it is a multiplayer game, but it really isn't at the same time, because it's just like if each side's still gonna have the same amount of points, you're still gonna have the same number of. Both sides kind of have the same amount of points. This is it's each defending player should have 2,000 points, or each attacking player should have 2,000 points. It's not. I was hoping for something a little bit more exciting for a multiplayer game, because I feel like if people are gonna play a multiplayer game, they're already doing something similar. This one also includes an objective in the center, but of course it continues the trend of being worth next to nothing. It's worth 250 points, which is, I guess, maybe a unit, depending on what kind of unit you kill. Mm-hmm. And if you're playing 4,000 points each, 250 points is nothing. It should be worth like 10% of the total of however many points per army or something, to kind of represent it changes per scale. At least as well, one thing they do in the setup as well, I'm kind of jumping around this mission, they tell you how the board changes for if you have more players. It sounds like the defender is just going to keep getting smaller, unless I'm reading that wrong.
No, they add boards to it.
Okay, they do add more board. Yeah. Okay, another 36 inches. Yeah, should be placed. Okay. But it's they do have a couple things, like the Waystone that you're trying to like the attacking player is trying to topple down, gives benefits to the elves while they're within range of it, so you're trying to push them away. But I mean, they're deploying pretty much right a few inches away from it, 6 inches away from it. The -1 to hit, I think there's a clawing miss. The elves are at a -1 to hit while being shot at. Is that just?
Yeah, I think the -1 to hit is the Waystone. Yeah.
But I mean, if you're doing the thematic version of Wolves of the Sea, are they shooting them? Do they have any shooting attacks?
A little. They have a shit ton of javelins.
Yeah, like that's nothing. Like, and so that's where I'm like, is that really beneficial?
Sure.
Like, I wish it was something a little more exciting, or they couldn't declare charges because the miss is too high if they're too far away, or it lowers your charge range. Something.
On the other hand, they're happy when they get next to the Waystone, and then the High Elves are shooting them back after. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I guess that way. So like I said, it applies to both armies. I thought it was only the elves. Okay, that makes more sense. But it's just a typical King of the Hill, pretty much, with slightly different deployment. So it's nothing too crazy. It's the first. I guess Upon a Shrouded Shores is more exciting. Other than this one includes a few special rules, which are kind of neat. But and the breakpoint. One issue I have with this, and I might be wrong, is if it's a 2v2, 2 of the players can target one army, and then if that army breaks, the rest of the models disappear. The army's removed.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a 2v1, which I don't like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for like a narrative mission of like, maybe not if you're doing a 2v2 tournament there, but like...
Oh, no, well, this wouldn't be a tournament for sure, but I'm just thinking like you and your buddy accidentally table or break someone on like turn 2 without noticing, and then all of a sudden like, oh, you got to take the rest of your models off, and now you can just sit out the game. Or your buddy continues 4 hours,
to play. Yeah, like,
oh boy.
Point game, yeah. Sure.
It feels bad when you have like a 2v2 because it's already gonna be a 4 or 5 hour long game if you're playing that.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a player just like, oh, sorry, you're now gone. Remove
Yeah,
your models, get
yeah.
out. And definitely if you're in combat or you're in your opponent's deployment zone or you have the objective, it's like, nope, you're gone now.
Yep. Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, on my end, I guess I kind of have the same read as the first of the three missions, in that this is a little bit more of a game mode with a narrative wrapping around it. It's, how do you have a 4, 6, or 8 somehow player game at 2,000 points rather than a super narrative experience? And I'm fine with that existing. I don't tend to ever really play a lot of big multiplayer games. I find that they end up being super long and cumbersome, but that's neither here nor there. Like, I'm happy that this exists. There's also some cool ideas in here. Like, I like different deployment zones for each side in general. And I think that's something that I wouldn't mind seeing even in tournaments. And then, the new ways to interact with terrain, the -1 to hit, etc. Like, that may be a little bit less, I think, employable in events, but it's just interesting that it exists for this kind of mission and that it's new design space that they're opening up. I, having played a lot of Age of Sigmar in my past, like, I find that different pieces of terrain interacting in different ways with armies tends to just be a lot for most people to remember, and most people don't end up playing with it most of the time. Where if you have 6 pieces of terrain and they all do something different, so that's something I would definitely shy away from. But I'm happy that it exists for people who want to play 2v2, but I probably won't play it. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
I'm basically in the same spot. Like, it's cool. I'm happy it exists. I wish they'd actually given us rules for a 3-player game, because doubles was kind of an easy problem to solve the
Yeah.
whole time.
You each get half an army. Go. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you both bring 2,000 points. You play on an 8-foot fucking table. Like, cool. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, and it's unfortunate because, like, looking at the special rules they did, I swear I helped develop a Horus Heresy mission that was similar, but it was like you had like a force field generator across the middle of the table. But like, I can see the idea working the same way, where like, instead of having 1 waystone per 2,000 points, you have 3 on the center line. They're destroyable, but while they exist, like, you can't draw a line of sight for charges beyond them, and you take a -1 penalty if you try to shoot things past it or whatever, because they're generating like a wall of mist between them.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, this is just like, okay, cool. If I only play this with 2,000 points, there's just 1 waystone.
Yeah. I
And
see what you
like, people can't even remember what an arcane monolith does. Like, I think we went through all of Capital City Bloodbath last year with no one remembering the hill was also an arcane monolith.
No, everyone forgets that, and they also forget it's worth more points.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why I tweaked the wording to specifically say if you have the hill, it's worth 250 points, inclusive of the points for being an arcane monolith.
Yeah.
But no one remembered it was an arcane monolith. So, like, special terrain is cool, but in the heat of a game, no one remembers what the fuck it does.
Yeah.
So again, love that it exists. It's very neat. I agree with Kevin. I really like different deployment zones. This one's explicitly borrowed from Flames 4, actually. But at the same time, I wish that those different deployment zones actually, like, mattered in some way,
Yeah.
or didn't allow me to charge my Pegasus Knights turn 1 straight into the enemy army.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's it.
Awesome. Okay, so now that we've looked at the 3 missions, like, I'm just gonna circle back and see what everybody's overall thoughts on the pack is. And then I think more importantly, is there anything you see in here that you'd like to see carried over to more event or competitive play, as we call it? And then do you think that SDS is testing out or foreshadowing ideas for future mission packs with this? What are your thoughts here, Danny?
My overall feels of this narrative pack, it's good. I think a lot of people will get play out of it. It sounds like people are playing Seize the Tower, playing the 500-point games. So that's good. I guess the multiplayer game, it does allow you to play something other than just, I guess, a unique scenario. But I think it's fun for anyone that wants to try some more narrative missions. Anything being ported over, I guess maybe don't see too much being ported over because the objectives aren't symmetrical. So if you're playing a tournament, being attacker defender does matter somewhat, but I don't see any of these missions being ported over. Maybe having a fun 500-point tournament, maybe have a night or half a day where you play some 500-point games could be fun. So you can break the game or do something silly with that, build some 500-point lists. But no, I don't see much being ported over for myself, anyways. And I could see SDS doing more of these. I think they should, because I'm always looking at Heresy for what's coming out and what could come out. And they're constantly coming out with, or at least for a while, they were doing just a Warhammer community updates with new scenarios and maybe a new unit.
And a new unit for each faction, yeah.
Yeah, or doing kind of what they already do with the Arcane or Armies of Infamy, where they'll have a little new unit that's just not even a new unit, but it's just a different way of building it with slightly different tweaks. Yeah. Maybe make some elves that are Dogs of War, or no, it's not Dogs of War, but regiments and mercenaries. Yeah. Doing different things like that where they can just change a unit a little bit to make it unique for the scenario and kind of add some flavor to the game with not having to release new models, just adding a little scenario. So I could see them doing a lot more of these. And I don't know how many people are actually playing the scenarios out of the Arcane Journals, since every one of them does come with its own scenario.
Yeah.
So
probably not many people. Yeah.
No, I was reading the High Elf one the other day, and I'd play it, but I had to find someone. I got to find someone to play the Beastman side of it.
Sure.
And then it was strange to see that you're forced to take a certain character in one type of unit. So it's a little different that way. But I'm excited to see more, just because it does allow players different ways to play the game. That's the biggest thing, which is always just a benefit. Even if people don't play them, they're still there for people to try. What about you, Ryan?
Sorry, I was just looking at the Chaos Arcane Journal mission. It's very Brindle specific. No, so I generally have the same issue. I like that they added the narrative pack. It gives people more options to play. But at the same time, I find all of those missions are better for the reenacting part. So if your group of players doesn't include a Wolves of the Sea army and a High Elf army, they're not particularly useful without a bunch of legwork on the player's part to tweak them. Now, things that I could see carried over, I have actually been toying around with attacker-defender missions where, the roll-off is not who goes first, but instead who is the attacker. And, I was trying to solve little problems like the Bretonnians could just choose to be the defender or something like that. I don't know, but I haven't quite worked through all those things. But ultimately, I do like missions where both parties have different things they're trying to do. And I like asymmetrical deployment zones. I like all those little things. I just, again, with my tournament play coded brain,
am just trying to figure out ways to translate some of that stuff into what is workable and doesn't just like fuck over a player.
Mhm.
And like I spent 7 years doing Flames of War as my primary like competitive game, where like attacker defender missions were the majority of the missions, but the game had a whole mechanic
Yeah, it was
about
different. Yeah.
yeah, like it has a whole mechanic to decide who the attacker is. Originally based on what your army was, and then later based on like a bidding system. And so it's one of those things where like as much as I'd love to create competitive attacker defender missions, I also don't want to have people lose a game based on a pre-turn 0 roll-off.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, my cavalry army has to be the defender. I guess I'm fucked. So just trying to balance the ideas that are flowing into my brain with what I can reasonably expect people to do in an event is the complicated part. Now, with regards to SDS's intent, um, I think I've said this before, but I'm just going to say it once again now, is I think people ascribe way too much intent to in like tea leaf reading to like
Sure.
random shit that we see on Warcom. Like, um, like for example, every Arcane Journal has had a thematic mission in it, and no one's been like, "Oh my god, I think SDS is telegraphing that future missions are going to have a 6-inch wide monument to the Chaos
Yeah, because
Gods."
I think nobody reads them in the arcade
No,
journals. That's why.
but you know
Yeah.
what I mean though is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they've been doing this for 15 months.
Yeah. Fair. It's a good.
Giving us 3 bonus missions doesn't mean that SDS is like magically telegraphing that mission design is going to go down this particular rabbit hole. Some intern probably shat those out over a fucking lunch break.
Sure.
Um, and at the same time, like, goes to macro things, right? Like, just because Warhammer Worlds events are doing a certain thing doesn't mean that the design studio blessed with the rando who's TOing the event at Warhammer World chose to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Sure. Yeah, so overall, like I like that this is out there. I mean, there's an audience for this, I'm sure. There's a lot of narratively minded old world players out there who I'm sure are going to be all over this stuff. So great for them. This is good. It's not necessarily for me, but like, it's great that it's out there. I really do enjoy though the fact that they really took to length the sort of interconnected narrative and the super specific narrative between Friedel and this Seaguard garrison over 3 scenarios. Like that's super cool. I'm there for it. I think there's some ideas that could be ported over to competitive play. I mean, it's a competitive or event or tournament play. I mean, it's nothing like revolutionary here, but like I think that asymmetrical deployment zones can work in a tournament style event. It would make picking sides a lot more meaningful, definitely for sure. So and I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it's kind of Ryan, you were talking about how there's you'd like to get where both players are playing sort of or aiming for different objectives in the mission, but that could be hard to implement with a game system. I think that you're correct, but I think that asymmetrical deployment zones is like the in between, where both players sort of have a different feel, but you're not screwing things over too much with a different deployment zone. Like unless you have a really restrictive deployment zone, most players probably have a game they can play out of it type situation. So I think that one's cool. I think random game length, if used sparingly, can also work in a tournament style event. So that's all cool. Speaking to the sort of foreshadowing aspect, like I agree with you, Ryan. I don't think that they telegraph things so explicitly. I would be surprised if we got the much discussed online. Was it called the General's Handbook type thing that would come out for the old world that was very similar to this? Like that would be super shocking to me. But maybe if you're not telegraphing things, though, it may not be in a deliberate manner. But the fact that they've thought about this, they've designed different missions, they've brought in new ideas to the game system, is just things that are going to be sort of circling about in their minds when they do eventually sit down to write another mission pack at some point. So I mean, they're exploring space, they're trying things out. So I think it's all positive without necessarily being a straight up foreshadowing or telegraphing of what they're going to be doing in a future mission pack. So, overall, that's cool stuff. So yeah, let's move on to sort of the third big aspect here of our talk about missions. Let's talk about community and tournament organizer designed missions. So I'm going to start with you, Ryan, and I know where you're going to go with this, but just for the benefit of everybody listening, what are your thoughts on TOs or even the community coming up with alternate mission packs, either for events or in general? And then is this something that you support and you see value in?
So I'm going to preface this as I am the most biased person about this subject, because I've literally been tinkering with the missions since 2 weeks after the game came out. So as a general rule, the part of the rules that I am the most okay with the community messing around with is everything after page 284. I think it's 284, which is where the missions are found, but everything like scoring, deployments, victory conditions, all of that, especially for a tournament setting, the missions we were given they were intended for general usage. They are not necessarily suited to tournament play. They're not necessarily suited to narrative campaign play. That's the part of the game that I personally, across every game system I've played in the last 20 years, have been the most okay with the community mucking around in, or with event organizers mucking around in, as long as people generally respect the overall concept of what the game is. And I mean, as much as we love to shit on where it is today, modern 40K missions would not exist if it wasn't for a collective of tournament organizers in the 2010s basically making better missions, or more competitively friendly missions than Games Workshop, and getting the buy-in of the bulk of the international community until the point where Games Workshop couldn't ignore them anymore and copied their homework.
Yeah.
So that is a space I am completely okay with people mucking around in, because the needs for the requirements related to the outputs of competitive play are not the same as the requirements of the outputs of beers in my basement gameplay or narrative campaigns, what have you. And ultimately, people running events will be more tuned in to what their players need to feel like they won a game and to feel like they won an event than a handful of dudes at Games Workshop headquarters who are just focused on how do we even make this game playable.
Sure.
So that's
yeah.
I think I answered all the parts of
Yeah,
your question.
you did. And you did bring some an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about is how us, the community, collectively looking at missions and changing missions could be a good like sort of forcing function to get GW to maybe update their mission packs or how they look at missions. That's an interesting point that hadn't even considered. But I mean, in general, to get back to the question here, like I'm also, as you are, Ryan, like 100% on board with people designing and running their own missions, either by modifying the existing missions or even just creating straight up new missions. Like I'm completely fine with that. I think at this point I've probably played more modified than sort of stock missions, and that I think is totally fine. So I do 100% see the value and support this. And like you, Ryan, I think it's the area of the game that is the least controversial for people to muck around with and change. Yeah, unless you do something really crazy with your missions, guys, like it's never going to prevent me from attending an event, or it's never something that's really going to bother me. So I'm all for it. What are your thoughts, Danny?
For me, I'm 100% with a TO or someone creating some unique missions or something for an event. It does actually kind of bring some new life into the game. Sometimes it's exciting as long as it's not. I guess you can add new things to the game as long as it's. I guess I'll get into that a little bit later, but like just doing some changes to the mission can just bring some new life. I guess the best way I could say it. It doesn't really change your list building aspects. I guess it can, depending on how your mission is, but it just changes things. That's all I'm gonna say.
Sure. So less general, more specific there. Ryan, like what are, from your perspective, some of the do's and don'ts of mission design? Do you think there's a right way to sort of like right way, air quotes here, to address this? And then when do you think that custom missions start to become problematic or detract from the game experience in your perspective?
Okay, so I'm going to start with general missions. I think overall, there's no wrong way to make a mission as long as you establish what you're trying to do. So, like, as I said with the narrative missions, you're trying to tell a story, make the mission tell that story. If you are trying to make a tournament mission, then you're trying to create a situation where both players have a reasonable chance of scoring an equal amount of points. If they literally stood there and did nothing, they would get a tie. So those are my two big caveats to these answers. As to my don'ts, particularly, I hate in-game admin. So if you have me rolling on a chart every turn to determine the fucking weather, or having to write down that I have scored X number of whatever every turn, or rolling a die to see if I flipped over the right haystack and found the fucking treasure chest, I hate you. Those missions have a time and place, and like they are great in my basement when I'm like half cut. They are not what I want to do during a tournament. So because we'll just forget. Like if you put the game on a timer and then expect players to roll off at the start of every turn, people are just going to forget. It's one of the biggest things that always happened with the night fighting rules in old 40K and in Flames of War. People just be like, okay, cool, night fighting's over now. Like, we're not doing this roll off. No one's gonna fucking remember. So those are my don'ts. Is like any kind of administration required during the game that is not essential to the mission in a way that adds value is just a don't for me. It doesn't help. It just confuses people. And when you have 20 iterations of the same mission going on, and they're now playing out differently because different people rolled differently on a chart, or people forgot about the chart and won their game but would have lost if they'd actually rolled on the chart, is just bad feels for everyone. Dues respect what the game is. Again, I talked a lot earlier about what medieval historical fantasy is trying to simulate. If you start making missions that are, achieving victory through God, I hate how my job is showing through my opinion now. But I like if you start making medieval historical fantasy missions that you win through, for lack of a better term, maneuver warfare methods. Like not through like the destruction of the enemy, but through eliminating the enemy's ability to fight through arbitrary maintenance of ground or what have you. You are no longer simulating what Warhammer, the old world of Warhammer Fantasy Battles exists to be. And so just generally like respect what the game is, which is focused on routing the enemy in a pitched battle. You can have objectives, you can have secondaries, but they all need to feed into that overarching objective of I routed the enemy. Like there should not be a situation where you took massive casualties, the enemy did not, and you win the game.
Yeah, that feels super gamey. Yeah.
Exactly. And it feels anti-theme, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't win the pitched battle by taking more casualties than the other guy.
Yeah. And then on some rule technicality, having won.
Exactly. Like it's not a sport. It's not an
Yeah.
adjudicated activity. It's literally people murdering each other, mostly for money. Um, but that's and people. I'm sure there will be plenty of people that will disagree with me about this. I'm just very fixed in my opinion of what the game is and what it's doing. Other
Sure.
people are fixed in their opinions. That's fine. But that's my 2 cents. And like you'll see it, you've probably already seen it because elements of missions I have tweaked are being used everywhere at this point. And I have newer and varying versions that are coming out over the summer. And that's just what I focus on is like trying to keep the game simulating what I think a medieval battle kind of looked like. In a historical fantasy setting. And also, avoiding implementing
Too much admin. Yeah.
too much administration and too many modern warfare conceits.
Sure.
Because it's a big thing. You get people, they start talking about tactics and things, and their depth of tactical knowledge extends to 1937 and no further.
Sure.
And that's it.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Danny, what are your thoughts on the do's and don'ts?
I'm going to be a little shorter, but a bit quicker. For me, I guess when designing missions for myself, whenever I do, it's just trying to figure out, I guess, if there is a theme to it. Like, is it going to be more narrative or trying to be a competitive mission or more balanced mission, I guess? And if it's like for a balanced mission, I always try to at least look at all the factions. Like, it's not going to just, oh, I'm playing X faction, so this mission's going to be significantly harder. Like, oh, I need a wizard on here to cast a spell. Well, certain armies just don't have wizards.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, that's just not going to be a fun time to do certain things. Or having maneuverability, because not every army is as maneuverable as others. So that's, I feel like designing missions, you don't want to do something like that. But if you're designing some different missions where the objectives are holding objectives or doing certain things. That's in an event kind of perspective, you kind of have to make it just a win-loss draw, because you don't want to have a mission where, oh, mission 1 was just battle lines kill each other, but then mission 2 is hold this objective, and if you end the game with it, you get an extra 400 points. Well, now someone can score 2,600 points or something from mission 2, so it's weighted a little higher than other missions, which might skew things. Like, it probably won't, but it has a potential to. Yeah, but I guess when you're designing narrative missions, it's just trying to make it so it's more fun. I spent shortly after the game launched, I took the General's Compendium book from 6th edition, which has a narrative campaign kind of map, and I spent some time trying to convert those all to the old world. I don't think I've shared it really since I finished transferring it, and I had intentions of doing that, but it has a ton of missions in there that are not narrative based, or they are narrative based, and it's like fighting in some place with like a really mountainous terrain, so it allows a couple extra units to get skirmish for the game, which is fun, but that's again going to be more of a narrative thing, because someone could easily turn one of their units maybe a little stronger because now they can design their list to have that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just mainly what you want to do for the missions. Whether it's going to be you're trying to make a fairly balanced list, or if you want to make a fun kind of narrative, retell a story, or even just a asymmetrical, I'm defending, you're attacking. You can bring 3,000 points, and I'm just going to bring 1,500, and your entire goal is to table me, and my goal is to just have a model alive, which I know is not usually how these things work, like historically, but it's maybe just like holding out until your reinforcements arrive, and that's the whole kind of idea. Like hold the castle, hold whatever, which I guess isn't very much historically. Like some parts of it probably not very historical. I'm not super knowledgeable about that, but
Well, it makes sense narratively, at least, right? Like if you
Yeah.
sell me your scenario as, these guys have less points because something else is happening if they last long enough, like that
Yeah.
makes sense, right?
I just think of like the Siege of Prague, where you have Magnus coming up, and the Kislevites are just trying to hold out and wait for Magnus to show up with the knights to kind of save the day. That kind of idea.
Yeah.
So there's still some space to play and kind of design missions that way. But it's for don'ts, just try not to do it random, and if you do it random, like have random things, make them don't have it at a competitive event. And if you have to have them there for like somehow, don't make the missions like scaled, like it's going to be a win-loss draw. And as the game progresses more, I'm leaning more and more into like win-loss draw kind of scenarios. It's just easier.
Yeah.
And it kind of keeps the pack a little tighter too for events, which I find. You don't have weird skews, like people getting 20 O's and stuff like that.
Mhm.
How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I think like one thing that you said, I think, which is probably something to take to heart if you are out there designing missions for something, is you said, Danny, that you think about how all of the different armies are going to interact with your mission. I think that's something that even GW, when they design missions that are sort of not the cookie cutter, this comes in the base rulebook mission set, is something they forget themselves. Like, I think probably a good test to run on your mission when you're done designing it is, which army out of the lot is the one that is the hardest screwed over by this mission, and can they still actually win it? And then if the result of that test is, they still have a pretty good shot and fair shot at winning it, then you probably have a well-balanced and designed mission. So yeah, I think that's a good thought. You sort of, you brought me there, Danny. In general, I'm a little bit less passionate than Ryan is in terms of mission design, but I think I definitely agree with some of the bigger items that you brought, Ryan. I think the most important here is, at least from my perspective, don't design missions that detract from the overall feel of the game. Like, this is a kill points focused game. This is a game that's simulating or is attempting to simulate as much as we can a fantastical medieval universe. We all have an idea of how that's supposed to play out. Don't force me to run errands to score points in your mission. Like, it just doesn't work, and that's something I would definitely shy away from. I agree with Ryan. Like, administration, like admin tasks on the side to keep sort of track of your mission just detracts from the game, especially in a tournament context where you're on a clock, either actually on a chess clock or just in general because you've got X amount of time to finish your round. I don't think those are very it's not a conducive environment to have sort of that admin on the side. And then also be careful about missions that indirectly penalize certain lists and list design choices that your players have made. I always hear, well, you knew the mission pack ahead of time. Like, you should have designed your list as a in taking that into consideration. But in reality, you have a mission out of 5 or 6 that has a specific item in it. So, like, do you shift your entire list for that? And then the army that you match up against in that specific mission is also important in terms of the overall calculus, and something that's quite difficult for your players to plan around. So I would just shy away from that. Recently, Danny and I were both in an online event that rewrote the mission set entirely, and it was a great event overall. Like, I'm not slagging them, but like, just a few things out of all those missions that we played that sort of irked me, and that like I would shy away from in terms of a tournament context if I was designing 5 or 6 missions. Is we did, Ryan, to get back to your point, have in one of the games a weather table to roll on every turn, which was like, I don't think anybody I talked to enjoyed that. So I would just shy away from that.
I mean, I enjoyed that when I got to +1 strength for the last
Sure.
round.
Yeah, exactly.
Push the vampire counts away.
Exactly. Just when you were, yeah.
About it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we enjoy it when it sort of works into our favor, but like in general, I mean, I don't think that's a great way to do it. Secondly, another thing that was kind of I didn't really appreciate from sort of that whole setup was, you had different pieces of the same terrain having different effects on the board based on which sort of map layout you were playing. So, if you were playing map A, for instance, then or map design 1, sorry, you like forests would obscure line of sight, but they wouldn't on map 2, and on map 3 they would also be dangerous terrain, but they wouldn't in the other ones type situation. I found that to be super tedious, and nobody had internalized it in all of my opponents, and in all of our games we'd sort of look at each other virtually and we'd be like, oh shit, is this one of the missions where the forests are dangerous? Is this one of the missions where they obstruct line of sight or not, like, or where the map layout, sorry, which I definitely don't recommend doing. There were also in that mission pack like penalties that hit lists more than others. So like, some missions penalize having flyers in your lists, for instance, by, flyers can't use Swift Stride or whatever, which was just, I think, brutal for some armies. And then some other armies were just like, oh, well, I think I'm going to have a good time in this particular matchup and mission matchup. So I would shy away from that. And then the last thing, I think, Danny, you mentioned this one there, but like different scoring criteria and different ranges of scoring in different missions will impact the overall standings. And if you're building missions for a tournament in ways that you probably don't intend or foresee. So we had in this particular tournament one mission that just had a bunch of objectives that you could score all over the map, and I ended up scoring like something wild, like 2,700 points, even though I only killed like 1,700 points of my opponent's army, which definitely impacted my standings, just because I got lucky on objectives turning on when I was sitting on them and stuff. So I would shy away from that kind of stuff in a tournament setting for sure. So yeah, just a few. I guess I gave you guys more don'ts than do's in this case, but just some thoughts there. Okay, let's move on to our last question here, our last segment or thought. Okay, do you guys think that the design studio, so SDS, should be looking at these community design missions that were that you're seeing crop up in tournaments across the world when they do refresh or change the missions in the core rulebook? And then what would you like to see the SDS bring on from the community when they do eventually redesign their missions? Let's start with Danny for this last one. Oh, Danny.
Oh, there we go. Sorry,
Yeah.
my mic was off there. So I can definitely see SDS look into the community. They are definitely a little better these days with maybe not saying they're working with the community all the time, but they definitely have. Like I was playing, I guess, 8th edition 40K when they started kind of leaning towards taking some of is it ITC, their tournament pack,
the
and kind of
ITC,
kind of making that the standard, which I remember being pretty excited about because the missions during that time were just I end the game on the objective, I win at one point, and I remember just not enjoying those scenarios. So having like the community kind of as a way to at least influence or inspire like the actual studio for creating certain missions, like oh, I kind of like how they did that, but let's tweak it this way or do something it's kind of exciting or hoping they'll do. 'Cause I just would like some. I would like. I guess I don't know if they really can do much more with the scenarios, but I'm sure they could. And even for like some more of these thematic ones, they can definitely look to the community. I know they kind of got in trouble for the taking a little bit. I don't know if it's true, but they took some. What was it, fan made content for the
Tilea,
map
yeah,
for Tilia?
Tilea, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff down there, and they had to remove it off of
That was-
the.
So
Sorry, what's that, Ryan?
that was being done by contractors, not by SDS.
Yeah, so
Sure.
somebody messed up. But I mean, hopefully they do at least look at that, and maybe at least not. Maybe I guess they would never. They don't credit many people these days, but it would be
Or
nice
at
to
all,
see some
yeah.
credit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least get maybe a mention on their community page. Like that'd be as much they would get. So I could see them doing something maybe like that, just having someone from the community go on and just kind of talk about, oh, we helped design these missions, or I made these missions for this event. Something. But I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon.
I would be
Good.
shocked. I'll buy you a beer if that happens.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking because there was what event was it locally? It wasn't LVO or somewheres where they. I know it's probably a rumor, but supposedly they wanted to.
Yeah,
What did they
yeah,
want?
yeah. They
Yeah,
wanted
it was-
to have legacy factions and
It's removed from the
PW,
pack, and they're like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, that was LVO.
Yeah, so like I can still see them because they're anti-legacy factions.
for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's just from head up. Like they have to push that; they're not allowed to. So therefore, it's frustrating. But yeah. But
They published them.
Sorry, what's that, Ryan?
No, it just sorry. It's one of those like if you're gonna be so against them that you won't provide prize support to independent events, why'd you fucking write them in the first place? But
Yeah,
that's
this.
a
Yeah.
whole different episode.
Yeah, this whole
Yeah,
situation
100%.
is a train wreck, frankly. Like, they are literally the studio or the organization that writes the rules for the legacy factions is literally the only one that won't let them be played in events, which is wild. So, anyways, but I won't. Yeah, we won't go down that rabbit hole right now.
Actually,
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
I
Sorry,
would just
Danny.
say, like, I don't know if there's anything we need to bring on from the community that I'm thinking of. I guess if they're gonna include objectives in any ongoing scenarios, just make them worth a little bit more. Like I know the missions for that 500 point scenario, they're at least worth more because they didn't really change them too much for the scenarios, but it's also 500 points, so it's impactful. Like the objective's worth 100 points for a 500 point game. So, and then killing, so all those secondary objectives are worth a decent amount compared to normal games.
Yeah, that works. And I think you can write some tournament friendly lists that have secondary objectives like that are worth a meaningful amount of points. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it would be silly for SDS not to look at what's happening around the world and around the community in events and tournaments when they do refresh their mission pack or write a new one. So I would absolutely, for what it's worth, suggest that they do so. Just in terms of like some really basic things that could be brought on if you're trying to make these missions both tournament and regular play friendly, is like maybe reduce something like the random elements, as what as you see, for instance, in meeting engagement with rolling for what comes on and what doesn't, which just like nobody likes it, and you sort of just deal with it and you hope that it doesn't affect you too much, but it's like nobody's super pumped about playing a mission like that. And then the second or there's two more, like I think breakpoint scoring should at least be standardized with the other missions so that it's runnable without modification in an event or tournament style play. And then I would definitely change the watchtower mission to have any other piece of interactable or terrain you can climb on or walk through, rather than an actual tower in the middle. So those would be some changes I'd like to see at the most basic level. But in general, I think it behooves the SDS team to look at what's happening out there, and see if there's anything of value that they can port over. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, what kind of staff officer would I be if I didn't endorse stealing everyone's fucking homework?
Fair.
So, no, ultimately, like, the design studio should keep a pulse on what the wider community is doing, thinking, and saying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they should also have enough integrity to their vision, being the creatives that actually own the production of this game, um, to stay the course with what they think they want to an extent. Like, there's a limit of like give your customers the thing that they're asking for, but also at the same time, the designers are the creatives that are generating the thing we're playing. And I feel sometimes there's like a weird disconnect between the community and the designers, where the community is not getting that, like, okay, cool, I know you played insert edition here, but we're playing the old world now, and this is what I wrote. And you see that a lot with the FAQ answers. Um, so that's kind of a thing. But no, I think ultimately, I think what's going to happen is we're going to see something similar to what was the first Horus Heresy campaign book after the
The Siege of Cathonia.
right. That was the one that included the quote unquote matched play missions that were also completely unsuited for matched play.
Yeah.
But like ultimately I think that's the same thing that's gonna happen. We're not gonna get a free fucking PDF with 6 new tournament missions in it. We're
No.
gonna get a book. It's maybe gonna have 1 or 2 more Armies of Infamy and a bunch of story shit. And at the end is gonna have an annex with matched play missions. Because of course it's gonna be a book. And I
Yeah.
just hope that like they do pay attention to the stuff that like Rob and Val and Andrew and myself and Danny and other people have been doing for a recommended comp and a recommended mission set.
Sure.
Because unfortunately, I truly believe it's going to be baked into a book and not a free PDF. So I want it to be valuable enough that I'll actually buy it instead of fucking it off and writing my own missions like I'm doing anyway.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like, what have they released that has been in free PDF form? Legacy Armies. I mean, aside from that, is there a
And
like?
the
Yeah.
3 missions that we just talked about.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. Okay, I
And
take that
full
back. Sorry.
um, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think we're gonna see any of that until all was it 9 original
Yeah.
factions.
We got
or
2 more
core-
books. Yeah.
Yeah, so like until Wood Elves and Beastmen are out, all of this isn't even on the table. So ultimately, like I think a lot of this is like year 3 of the game problems or discussions, ironically.
Well, I don't think it's going to take that long to release Beastman.
Well, no, but it'll be like it'll be into year 2.5
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
before such a thing shows up.
Past this.
Um, But I think, or I guess technically it's year 1.5.
Sure.
So into the 3rd year of the game is when the missions become relevant. But I think they should pay attention to the community. But I think at the same time, if they have a vision, they should stick to it, but they should communicate it at the same time. That's like the biggest failing with this game right now is the designers clearly had something in their head they were trying to get out.
Yeah. Somebody
And
told them to do something else last minute. Yeah.
not even that, but like even with the core rules, like the designers were envisioning something. It may have translated poorly, but like getting those articles like just use more great weapon attacks to kill dragons. Like, do you know what a great weapon does? I'm concerned.
Do you know how initiative works? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those like there is a disconnect between their vision, what we're experiencing on the table, and how they're communicating with us. And I hope they can work through that with missions to not get wildly out of step with the community like 6th, 7th edition 40k did.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, and I've had this discussion with a few people before, is like, maybe they wanted it to be a cavalry and monsters game. Like, you get people out there arguing, no, this is not the rank and flank massed battles game that, I wanted. I'm like, okay, cool, but the guy who fucking
Yeah.
wrote the game, maybe he thinks 300 years earlier was cavalry and dragons.
Yeah.
Maybe that is actually the game they want us to be playing. We don't know because they're so cagey about what they tell us about stuff.
Sure.
And I just wish, I wish they would drop a mission pack, whether it's in a book or a PDF, with an explanation of either the narrative or ludonarrative explanation of why these missions are what they are. Like, just helping people understand their decision-making process will help fan-made content continue to enable the game, so on and so forth. Where right now, there's a lot of guessing. There's a lot of, I have no background in Warhammer Fantasy Battles prior to the Old World, as an example. So I find I have a very different perspective than someone like Danny or someone like Val, who are very steeped in previous editions. And so, I read the words on the page for what the rulebook says, and I think about missions from a what are we trying to simulate perspective, and other people come at it from a, well, 6th edition said this, it was phrased similarly, therefore we should conclude blah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
But you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I
I
read
know.
the book and I go, okay, cool, I don't know that, therefore I can't conclude that. And it's the same with the missions. I think, if they do want to draw on previous things, they need to tell us that. And they did that with the article about the Nuln Army of Infamy and things like that. I just think we need when and if they finally give us more missions, I would appreciate communication from the studio so that we know where they're pulling from with whatever it is they give us.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Like I agree with what you're saying. I think we're maybe like a lot of things are sort of bleeding into each other right now. Like
100%.
like some of the issues with how overall game design, the rules, like how things interact with other things on the tabletop. I don't think that the best mechanism to address that is through a mission pack. Like I'm I'm happy for them if they try to patch over some issues that exist through a mission pack, then fine. But probably there's better ways, like touching up the rules, addressing points, or giving us some commentary, But yeah,
That's not what I was getting at. I was more just getting at like if and when they give us more missions, I
yeah,
wish they communicate with us about the why instead of just saying, "Here are missions. Be happy with them or get fucked."
sure.
Um, that's all. Is like I feel like a lot of the content we've been getting from them is, "Oh, you guys are just not getting what this game is." And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well then please tell us what the fuck it is, because clearly we're not getting the core concept.
Yeah. Help us understand.
Yeah. Just use more great weapons. Yes, Minotaurs totally kill dragons. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
It happens every game.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. All right, perfect. I think we've beat this mission horse to death now. So let's start to wrap the episode up. So thank you, listeners, for being here with us this evening. Thanks to Danny for showing up last minute and replacing Andrew. That's it's really appreciated. I hope everybody out there appreciated the episode. Make sure you guys sign up to some of the events that we got coming up. I think. Ryan pointed it out earlier. There's 2 tickets left for teams at CHTT still. I know there's a ton of tickets left also for the events that both of you guys are running in late May / early June. So let's see the community come together for those. Ryan, anything you want to shout out before we close out here?
Well, firstly, Andrew, feel better, man. Following from that, yes, please fill up those last 2 teams at Can't Hammer Team Tournament. And definitely please consider attending CTC for Danny's tournament or the Old World Grand Tournament here in Ottawa for the event I'm TOing. And of course, as always, Capital Seed Bloodpath is the premier Warhammer Fantasy Battles
In
flash.
this part of the world, yeah.
Correct. Like
Yeah.
oldest existing / whatever. Anyway, please, any of those 3 events, you're happy to be there. You'll definitely be able to meet Kevin, Andrew, Danny, and myself at some combination of them.
Yeah.
So they're great. Please show up.
Awesome. Danny, anything you want to shout out?
I got nothing really. I'm just happy to be on again and appreciate being part of the podcast when I can. Yeah, as everyone else was saying, come to the events. We love to chat Warhammer in person or online, really. Any chance I get.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you around for the next episode.